What is going on, guys? Politics Gaming here, and today we are going to be doing an election prediction between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Today we're going to be doing that because of just the job that President Trump has been leading the country through this pandemic, and I really wanted to look into what could happen, and I really think there's going to be one thing that's going to change this entire scenario, and it's going to be the economic impact payments. Now, the economic impact payments is something that everyone is going to be receiving within the next couple of weeks of around $1,200 of economic stimulus that is being provided by the federal government in a recent $2.2 trillion bill that passed Congress nearly unanimously in both houses. And basically, this is going to provide people with economic relief, whether that is enough economic relief is due to the future, because we are probably looking at a couple more economic stimulus payments that we could actually be getting our hands on in the next couple of months, because we're not in this until, whenever the lockdowns stop. It's going to be until they can actually find a vaccine, because this is a brand new virus and we are looking at this for about 18 months. So first off, we're going to go ahead and look over at Arizona. I do not believe that Joe Biden could actually win Arizona. I do think that he could actually make it a little bit closer, but I don't think that Joe Biden could actually win Arizona. Coming over to Minnesota, I do believe that President Trump could actually carry Minnesota by a very slim margin. I do not believe that it is a very for sure thing. Joe Biden is leading in Minnesota by about 12 points according to a Star Tribune poll. But at the same time, President Trump was actually able to keep Minnesota within 10 points in the last election, and I do believe that with a little bit of push, he's actually able to win Minnesota. Coming over to Wisconsin, I think this is going to be the closest out of all three races in the Rust Belt. Ohio, I've already made red because I do believe that President Trump will actually be able to pull Ohio back to him in this coming election. But coming back over to Wisconsin, I do believe that President Trump would be able to win Wisconsin by a slightly larger margin than he was actually able to win it by in 2016. He only won these three states by about 100,000 votes combined. I believe it was 100 to 170,000, I believe. But Wisconsin, or actually Michigan, was the closest out of all of them. Coming over to Michigan, I do believe that President Trump would be able to either slightly or very narrowly win it. But at the same time, Real Clear Politics does show that Michigan is going over toward the Democratic column by about 4 points. That's within the margin of error. So, giving the benefit of the doubt over to the polls, I'm going to go ahead and put Michigan over into the Democratic column. But coming over to Pennsylvania, the home state of Joe Biden, I do believe President Trump would be able to win Pennsylvania by, again, a very slightly larger margin than he was actually able to win it by in 2016. Now, my reasoning for that is actually because in the polling, we are seeing Pennsylvania 3.8 points in the favor of Joe Biden, but that is within the margin of error, and a morning call poll conducted in February was actually a tie. So competitively, Pennsylvania is still pretty competitive. So we are looking at that. So I do believe Trump would be able to win Pennsylvania and Wisconsin by very slightly larger margins, but would lose Michigan in the process. Coming over to New Hampshire, I do believe that the economic stimulus payments would be able to benefit him in the state of New Hampshire very, very slightly. He was the closest margin in a long time, ever since the 2000 election in New Hampshire. So I do believe that President Trump would be able to actually win New Hampshire for the first time in 20 years. Coming over to Maine, I do believe that the economic stimulus payments would be able to help him again in the rural region. Now, that would give him the at-large region of the state of Maine, as well as the 2nd District of Maine, giving him a total of 3 electoral votes from Maine, along with 1 electoral vote going toward Joe Biden. Coming over to Virginia, I do believe that Joe Biden would be able to win by a very comfortable margin, but at the same time, I do believe that a lot of the gun rights rallies that have been happening in Virginia are going to hurt the Democrats, and I do not believe that Virginia would be able to stay Democrat in the long run. Now, that's not a permanent thing. Now, there are a lot of cities in Virginia that actually have control over that vote, but at the same time, I do not believe that it's a very for sure thing that Trump can win Virginia in this election cycle against Joe Biden, but it's you know, it's still kind of there, but I'm going to give it to Joe Biden by a very comfortable margin. Coming down to North Carolina, I do believe President Trump would be able to win North Carolina by a very comfortable margin. North Carolina is shifting red, and I do believe that he is able to win by about maybe 10 points or more, possibly even 5 to 10 points. That's kind of, you know, a kind of guesstimate. I'm not more sure on how high or low a candidate can actually win. I'm not that demographically educated, but I do believe that North Carolina could go toward President Trump in a very comfortable margin that's way outside of the margin of error. And then the last state we're going to come over to is actually not Hawaii, but I forgot the color of that in, but we're going to look at Florida. Now, coming over to Florida, I do believe that Florida is going to be shifting red over the next couple of election cycles. Their House of Representatives and their Senate is most likely going to start going toward the red column, and I do believe presidentially and even Senate-wise and even House of Representatives-wise, we are looking at a red Florida, but I do believe he could actually win it by a very slightly harder margin than he was actually able to in 2016. And what I mean by that is that I think he won Florida by about maybe 100,000 votes. And then in this one, I do believe he would be able to expand on that margin even greater in the coming years. That doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way, and that's the same way with North Carolina, but that's kind of how I believe it would go. And now we are looking at basically the same electoral college vote that we actually saw in 2016. And so he was able to make up for the loss of Michigan by gains in Maine and as well as gains in New Hampshire. So if you guys like this, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I will see you guys in the next one.